Set it up a little bit. How did you find this particular person? Because there are a lot of these to choose from now.
There are. I mean, so I would say I monitor financial Twitter pretty closely. I consult other resources as well. One of the resources we linked in the last episode, XY Planning, not something either of us are using presently, but a really cool portal into finding potential advisors for something like this. And so I just started looking at the different people who are out there, reading their little bio sketches, what types of offerings they had, and found a number of these people who did something similar, which was you could go to them with your portfolio at whatever stage it's at, armed with a list of questions that were interesting to you, and they would just assess it and answer your questions and talk about your whole, financial plan and give you feedback.
Some are a fixed fee model, but some are like an hourly model, right? You could get.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
And some are kind of a hybrid. So you can get like this one in particular was a fixed fee, but then you can add hourly extensions.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And for me, I chose the individual I did because of the sort of strength of guidance I was seeing them give out in financial media. And the offering itself seemed to fit me pretty well. And that was, I was with financial advisors for a number of years. I've now been on my own at that point for a couple of months. I had some things that I wanted to just kind of double check really and get some impressions on and ask some specific questions. And this individual seemed to fit the bill.
And this is something that Laura and I had been talking about for a while, and we had just made some portfolio changes and I was feeling still a little bit like, all right, we're getting ready to transition here into our, early retirement. And it'd be really nice to have an objective view, fresh set of eyes on this whole plan that we've developed ourselves, DIY it. I mean, we DIY the whole thing.
You did.
It'd be nice to have somebody look at this who was a certified financial planner and they had the title. They were someone who was going to be looking out for us, right? They are actually a fiduciary. But we didn't want to invest 1% of our entire portfolio to try and make that happen. We didn't want that long-term commitment. There are people that I'm friends with right now, very similar, they're the same age as us, that could really benefit from a service like this because it captures the whole picture. It's like everything. And I just had a conversation with some friends the other weekend and they don't even know what they have for assets. Like, oh, it's here and there, but I haven't checked. And do they have a will? Do they have a trust? No. And you and I are coming into this more prepared than most. You worked with financial advisors for 7 years beforehand. You and I have been talking about this for a couple of years now. We've done a lot of estate planning. So some of those things feel like, done.
Been there, done that.
Been there, done that. Right. But for people who haven't, this could be a tremendous value. Just getting that list, that checklist that says, hey, if nothing else to say, like, these are the most urgent things on your list. Like, do these 5 things. And the urgent list for you and I, probably not as urgent as for other people, but I could see some people really getting a lot of benefit out of this.
I can too. And, even people who are very successful by any measure, I've had 2 different conversations in the last couple of months where, I'm talking to somebody who I know to be pretty successful. One of them had been through some good startup experiences. One of them is in a high income job and is very successful in it. And we got talking about the show and what we were doing. And they were like, yeah, I honestly both of them were kind of the same. I honestly have no idea how long it is before I could retire.
Right.
I'm like, well,
not uncommon.
like, what? I'm like, what do you, how are you prepared? Like, what are you doing you both have kids? Like, what are you doing with your family and take care? I figured like we need to get to do some of that at some point, but it's not really a priority. I'm like, you're in your 40s.
Do you know what I wonder though?
It's cheap insurance to just get some help on that. Just get some guidance, right? A couple hours worth of effort to get some kind of like high level roadmap. That seems pretty useful.
Here's what I wonder. The early triage kind of the onboarding questionnaire, I wonder if that wouldn't trip some people like that up though. Because
I think it would,
because they actually are asking questions like, okay, what are your assets? Where, like, listing your assets, where are they? What are they? But then it's like, okay, what are your financial goals? And when do you plan to retire? And what do you think your annual spend is? What do you want your annual spend to be in retirement? What's your retirement date? And those are very big questions. You and I it was easy to answer those. Like we breezed right over those, but someone who has no plan, I wonder if they would see that questionnaire and go, oh man, I can't even do this, you know?
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess, one of my favorite things about this show, especially in terms of the feedback we get, which we both really appreciate, is when I sit back and reflect on how many of the topics we talk about are broadly applicable, irrespective of whether you're interested in, retiring early or achieving a specific FI target. They're just generally applicable, and anybody could find value in making sure that their financial sort of health is clear, right? Because we've all got blind spots.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Like every single one of us, you and I have talked numerous times about our blind spots on this show. I'm sure we're probably not going to stop anytime soon. And so, you don't have to have some long-term relationship with somebody managing your portfolio to get that kind of clarity. And yes, you can DIY this whole thing. Neither of us are being paid by anybody to talk on this topic, nor are we going to mention who we work with. That's not what the goal of this is. It's just, as a concept, like knowing where you are and being able to kind of orient yourself to what you might need to kind of address in terms of gaps, like that can only be beneficial.
And for you and I, part of the motivation was seeking a contrarian opinion and getting, we want that feedback loop, which forces us to look at the portfolio from a different angle and see it differently. And I feel like I got a ton of value here out of that spend. I wonder if it were someone who were further away from their FI date, like, is this still useful to that person? Or is it better for someone who is kind of further along in their journey? They have more assets. I mean, if you have $100,000 of assets, $1,000 for a consult is a bigger percentage of a portfolio of $1 million, right? So what would you say to that?
That's a great question. I think it depends on what level of information you already have. So for example, on the Discord that I spend time on, you're dealing with people in their 20s, sometimes early 30s, who are really well versed in the sort of tenets of personal finance. And they're marching towards their FI goals. And so I suspect many, if not most of them, would probably find less value in this kind of service at this stage because the fundamentals are in place and it's a simple portfolio and their goals are pretty straightforward. But farther along, as you start to get close to a transition date, even if you're well informed, it's a really good time to sort of look at the nuts and bolts of things and make sure you're comfortable. But for everybody else who's not obsessively thinking about FIRE and really digging in and doing the research or even knows where to start that research, man, I don't know how many people in your life you've run into like this, but I've found a lot of people who are doing a lot of the right stuff, working hard, getting, increasing their pay over time, but they don't have a clear strategy for investments. It's maybe kind of here and there and not concerted. And maybe they haven't thought through all these, questions of estate planning, for example, and having a comprehensive financial plan. They're going to find tremendous value. The earlier you start taking those decisions, doing the things you need to do, whether it's saving or putting, insurance in place, the better off you are, right? You're reducing risk. And so it's hard to argue that even though a fee, which here we're talking about $1,000 offering, yes, it's a lot in absolute dollars, but it could turn out to be priceless in terms of guidance.
I think, as I think about people who I'm friends with, who I could recommend this to, I wonder if they would see that as a barrier. It's like, well, geez, I don't even know how much I have, and I don't know if I need this kind of a service. I just kind of, maybe I should just tally up the numbers myself. I think it might be a harder sell to them.
I get it.
It's just, but it'd be, you and I see the value there.
Yeah, it's an individual question that you ask. I think it's a very good one to raise. And some people on the surface would immediately see the value. Others might never. And that's okay. It's an option that's out there for people who decide that it has merit to it.